haven't even set the date for the budget yet. So please forgive me if I'm not going to speculate about what might happen at an event that we haven't even decided a date on yet. But we've been really clear in our manifesto about the taxes that we won't increase. And we're not going to increase the taxes that working people pay, their income tax, their national insurance and their VAT, because I do recognise the struggle that ordinary working people have faced these last few years with the cost of living. And so those manifesto commitments around income tax, national insurance and VAT, they absolutely stand.
Right. Welcome back to British Tribune for another breaking news. Picture this. You're the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You've got a gaping hole in the public finances. Labour MPs breathing down your neck demanding a wealth tax. And your own party making U-turns faster than a Formula One driver with commitment issues. Welcome to Rachel Reeves' world, where saying no to taxing the wealthy apparently means saying yes to raiding pensioners' pockets instead. Because nothing says party of the working people quite like going after Grand's winter heating allowance while letting millionaires keep their yacht money untouched. So Rachel Reeves has reportedly decided that a wealth tax is off the table. Shocking. I know. A Labour government refusing to tax wealth? It's like discovering that water is wet, except somehow more disappointing. According to reports, our beloved Chancellor thinks that slapping a tax on the super-rich would just make them pack their bags and flee to Monaco faster than you can say non-dom status. Because heaven forbid we inconvenience people who own more houses than most of us have had hot dinners. But here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean absolutely mental. While Reeves is reportedly saying no to wealth taxes, she's apparently quite happy to consider what we might diplomatically call alternative revenue streams. Translation: she's looking at pensioners like a hungry vulture circling a particularly juicy carcass. Because nothing screams fiscal responsibility quite like targeting the demographic that built this country while giving the ultra-wealthy a gentle pat on the head and a promise that their offshore accounts remain perfectly safe. Now, let's talk about Lord Kinnock for a moment. The former Labour leader has been making quite the case for a wealth tax, suggesting it could commend the government to the public while raising between £10 and £11 billion. His proposal? A modest 2% levy on assets worth over £10 million. That's not exactly targeting your average Joe with his 3-bedroom semi in Stevenage, is it? We're talking about people who probably use £50 notes as tissues. But apparently, even this gentle tap on the shoulder of Britain's wealthiest is too much for our current Labour leadership. The irony here is thicker than yesterday's porridge. We've got union leaders like Sharon Graham from Unite pushing for wealth taxes, Labour MPs calling for wealth taxes, and even former Labour leaders suggesting wealth taxes. But the actual Labour government? They're about as interested in taxing wealth as a vegetarian is in a bacon sandwich. Instead, they're apparently eyeing up pensioners and considering hiking capital gains tax. Because why go after the people who can actually afford it when you can squeeze those who've already paid their dues? Let's pause here and appreciate the sheer audacity of this position. The government that campaigned on being different, on standing up for working people, on bringing fairness back to Britain, is reportedly more comfortable raiding pension pots than asking people worth tens of millions to contribute a tiny fraction more to the society that enabled their wealth in the first place. It's like Robin Hood in reverse, except Robin Hood at least had the decency to admit he was stealing. The excuse we're hearing is that wealthy people would simply leave if we taxed them. Right, because all those billionaires are just one tax bill away from abandoning their massive property portfolios, their business interests, their social networks, and their entire lives in Britain. Sure, some might make noise about leaving, but when push comes to shove, how many actually pack up and go? And more importantly, if someone's contribution to British society is so minimal that they can be replaced by their tax contribution alone, maybe we're better off without them anyway. But let's examine this flight risk argument more closely, shall we? Conservative MP Neil O'Brien claimed that even speculation about a wealth tax would drive investment away. Because apparently, our economy is so fragile that the mere whisper of asking the ultra-wealthy to pay their fair share sends investors running for the hills like teenagers fleeing a house party when the parents come home early. If your business model depends on paying virtually no tax, maybe that says more about your business model than it does about our tax policy. Here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Cabinet ministers have reportedly told The Times that a wealth tax is a non-starter. Not because it wouldn't work, not because it wouldn't raise money, not because it wouldn't be popular with voters, but because it might upset some very wealthy people who probably don't vote Labour anyway. Meanwhile, these same ministers are apparently quite comfortable with upsetting millions of pensioners who definitely do vote, and who definitely remember being promised that Labour would protect them. The government has already performed more U-turns than a particularly indecisive sat-nav. They U-turned on welfare reforms that were supposed to save £5 billion a year. They U-turned on scrapping winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. At this rate, the only thing they haven't U-turned on is their apparent determination to avoid taxing wealth, which is probably the one thing they should be doing a complete 180 on. Let's look at the international picture for a moment, because context matters. Several countries have tried wealth taxes and then scrapped them, including Germany, Sweden, and France. The wealth tax skeptics love to point this out as proof that such taxes don't work. But Spain and Switzerland have kept their wealth taxes, and they're doing just fine, thank you very much. Switzerland, in particular, that notorious socialist paradise, continues to tax wealth and somehow manages to attract wealthy residents. Funny how that works when you provide excellent public services, political stability, and a functioning society in return for those tax contributions. The Tax Foundation data shows that wealth taxes accounted for about 1% of GDP in Switzerland in 2022. That might not sound like much, but when you're looking at filling budget holes and funding public services, every percentage point matters. And here's the kicker: Switzerland hasn't exactly seen a mass exodus of wealthy residents, has it? In fact, it remains one of the most desirable places in the world for high net worth individuals. Maybe, just maybe, wealthy people care about more than just their tax rate. Now, let's talk about what this really means for ordinary British people. While the government dithers about whether to ask billionaires for a small contribution, working families are facing rising costs, crumbling public services, and the very real prospect of higher taxes on everything except wealth. Capital gains tax increases would hit people selling their family homes or small business owners more than it would affect those with diversified investment portfolios managed by teams of accountants. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Except the nut is a working family and the sledgehammer is fiscal policy designed by people who've never had to choose between heating and eating. The government's position seems to be that they'd rather tax anything and everything except actual wealth. Income, yes. Capital gains, probably. Pensions, apparently on the table. But ask people worth hundreds of millions to contribute a fraction more? Perish the thought. It's fiscal policy designed by people who think a pint of milk costs £20 and believe that struggling to pay the mortgage builds character. What makes this even more frustrating is that a properly designed wealth tax could be both effective and fair. We're not talking about taxing people's primary residences or forcing small business owners into bankruptcy. We're talking about asking people with assets worth over £10 million to contribute 2%. That's less than most people pay in council tax as a percentage of their property value. But apparently, even this modest contribution is too much to ask from those who benefit most from the infrastructure, legal system, and social stability that British society provides. The real tragedy here is the missed opportunity. Labour had a chance to do something genuinely transformative, to show that they really were different, to demonstrate that they understood the fundamental unfairness of a system where nurses pay higher tax rates than hedge fund managers. Instead, they're apparently more worried about upsetting people who wouldn't vote for them if Jeremy Corbyn personally delivered their tax refund with a handwritten apology note. So here we are, watching a Labour government tie itself in knots trying to avoid the obvious solution to their fiscal problems while simultaneously considering policies that would hurt the very people they claim to represent. It's political contortion worthy of a circus act, except it's not entertaining, it's just deeply depressing. The autumn budget is coming, and Rachel Reeves will have to make her choices clear. Will she continue to protect wealth while targeting everyone else? Or will she remember what Labour is supposed to stand for? Will she listen to the union leaders, the Labour MPs, and the former party leaders calling for fairness? Or will she bow to the pressure from people who probably have more money in their wine cellars than most families see in a lifetime? If you're as frustrated as I am about watching a Labour government bend over backwards to protect wealth while ordinary families struggle, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think Rachel Reeves should do. Should Labour grow a backbone and implement a wealth tax? Or are they right to worry about scaring away the ultra-wealthy? And if you want to stay updated on all the latest political developments, because trust me, there's always something happening in British politics, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. Until next time, this is British Tribune, reminding you that in politics, the only certainty is that there's always another U-turn just around the corner.